So what we have here is a Singer 720. Lovely machine made in West Germany. It actually says on the front of the machine. I think what people don't often realise is that the feet on these are replaceable, not by having to take off the shank on the side here, but simply by lifting and lowering different accessories. This one is for making buttonholes. It's spring loaded and moves backwards and forwards. Initially I think it's come off the 760, which I used to own. This one, great example. I'll show you how you go about doing a buttonhole. On the top there's a rotary cam, which you can turn around until the red stitches here, there's red zigzag, lines up with the symbol on the top of the machine. On the length of the stitch, it's set in between the two red marks. It's set to the red for the zigzag width. It's set onto needle position for buttonhole. It's set to the red zigzag, and it uses two positions, one with the machine going forwards and the other with the machine going backwards. So we start with the machine going forwards. Here I've got just a couple of thicknesses of material, so a bit thin really, but we'll see how it copes with this. Basically we start at the back and start sewing, and it will, what you'll see is it'll do a couple of bar tacks and then start moving forwards, and you go forward to the length that you want. Normally you would mark these out on your material, but if we just start here, we've done bar tacks and now it's moving forwards. You can hear how lovely and quiet that machine is. Let's say we go to there. We then, with the needle out of the machine, we then move over two places to the black. It will now do another couple of bar tacks, like that, and then we'll start going backwards. Until we get back to the beginning. Now, what it says is if you wish to make it thicker, with greater reinforcement, we start again. We go back to the red, another couple of bar tacks, until we get to the same position. We now change to the black, bar tacks, and now let's see how we've done. And you can see there, that is just a really lovely buttonhole stitch. Let's snip those off. It's very cleverly done. And once you're used to remembering all of the red settings, you end up with a buttonhole which is reproducible, because these are a couple that I did earlier, and you can see there's great consistency in those. If you find that one side is thinner than the other, well, you just adjust the stitch length on here a little bit either one way or the other. So with the machine there is 8 of these which are called double pattern selectors, and there are 2, 4, 6, 7 of the black ones which are single. On them you'll see they have a pattern that's etched onto them, and this is the pattern that can be reproduced. So they're basically a simple form of embroidery machine that will do a variety of patterns. There are also patterns that can be chosen along here, and these discs can be used in combination with each of those settings, which gives multiples of that pattern type, and each one then produces a different pattern, and each of the patterns can be varied depending on what width of stitch you use and the length of the stitch too. Just to show how that works in action, in the top of the machine, originally we had the buttonhole disc. Buttonhole disc comes out. To remove it, you press up the lever, and if you notice up the top here, what it does, it pushes the cam follower back away from the disc. If we take this Greek type of pattern, you'll notice underneath there is a gap, and that gap meshes up on the top here with the pin. So we align it such, push back the pin, and that fits on top, and then you can let go. So here we have a nice piece of contrasting material, so hopefully it'll show up with a yellow thread. For the double pattern selectors, the length of stitch should be somewhere in the A to D region. The zigzag can be set any way you like. I'll take it right up to the extent. Needle position is in the centre, and the selector should be set to the one that looks a bit like a top hat. Then when we start stitching, you'll see that the material actually goes backwards and forwards. And the pattern is going round, and the cam follower is moving the material back and forth, and you end up with a pattern which represents on the cam. So just showing conventional stitches now. It's set on 2 and straight stitch. Then if we increase the stitch length, this will go up to 4/6 on the dial, which is stretched out to that extent, or it will go down to basically a satin stitch between 0 and 1. If we take it back up to 2 and then engage zigzag, there's a zigzag stitch. What I should show you is, of course, what it looks like on the reverse. It's a lovely even stitch. So the machine has 8 inbuilt stitches: a basic straight stitch, a zigzag, a ball, a pyramid, a blind stitch, a box stitch, a multi-stitch zigzag, and a scallop. This is the ball stitch. I've set the zigzag to the maximum width, and the stitch length is in the sort of satin type area. The foot pedal is set to the minimum speed, and then if we start sewing, might want to be a little bit along this stitch. There we go. And you can see how we now get this type of pattern, and again on the reverse, nice and even. So that's a ball type stitch. We then have a pyramid. And we have a blind hem stitch. Normally with the blind hem we're going to be going along the stitch length, so that's more like that. And again you can see what a lovely stitch that is. We come back, the next pattern along. Let's just go out of the material. Next pattern along. And a running zigzag. And finally, maybe if I come a little bit further over, and we go to the scallop stitch. Let's make that a little bit close together. And if we just show you here a satin stitch, so the satin stitch is between 0 and 1 on the stitch length dial. This is on a zigzag, set to like 4. Pedal speed set to min. It still goes pretty fast. If we have a look at that, you see that's quite close together. If we want to go close together, we go closer to the 0 dial. And here you see a very dense, well, pretty dense satin stitch. Probably wants the tension adjusted slightly, but that's the way it goes. One of the really useful accessories on this machine is the chain stitch. To do chain stitching, you take out the usual bobbins. I've seen someone on the internet reviewing these machines saying these bobbins are difficult to get hold of. That's absolute nonsense. They might have been at one time, but they're now freely available and I guess made in China, and are really quite inexpensive. But the other thing you have to do is to replace the plate. So this is the conventional plate. They're held in place with 2 magnets. That's the basic plate. The chain stitching plate is this one, which has a particular pin there. This has been re-engineered from a 760 because it was originally missing, but this fits in place back into the magnetic area, and this part here of this attachment that's in the machine fits in like a bobbin. I can do it and still show you. I'll just move that. There we go, a little bit awkward with my fingers. That fits in place. And the other thing that you do on the side, you just put the thread through this particular hook. That's what this hook is for. It is for chain stitching. Just adds that little bit more tension. If we now take a piece of fabric and start stitching, we start at one end. It's a straight stitch. And we stitch off, and it just looks like a normal stitch to start with, but the magic occurs because you can do that. It's so clever. So for putting in temporary seams or anything where you need to hold the fabric together while you're doing something during the construction of your garment, there's a chain stitch is just ideal for that, and just so easy to do from one end. Chain off, and then at this end, usually if we just snip close to the end, because it's always the end that is just come off that you undo. So we're looking to get the loose end here. There we go. And it comes out as simple as that. On the subject of bobbins, these bobbins are really clever because they allow you to take them apart if you wish, before you've used up all of the cotton. If you want to change the colour, take off the base that just screws on and then screw it back. But what's also really clever about this machine, and bobbin winding on this machine is probably easier than any other I can think of. Basically you take the bobbin, which is now back together, put it in place, clip it down, and just to the left here is the bobbin winder. You press that over, and then with the machine on, you simply stitch until it's full up, or you have it as full as you want it, and then when you push the plate back in, you'll notice it pushes the bobbin winder back. Maybe worth mentioning the darning plate. This you can see is raised in the centre, so the feed dogs never come to the surf, never engage with the material. The pressure is set to D for darning, which basically lifts the pressure off the material, and it allows you, once it's down, you can move it backwards and forwards. So put it on a zigzag stitch, and we can move material back and forth as you see fit, and you end up with sort of garnish. Not very, I haven't done it particularly neatly, but you get the idea. When you've finished, of course, put it back to corresponding pressure, which is normally about 4, and then just lift the plate out. There is another plate that's worth noting, which is if you're only doing straight stitching. Now you must ensure that you are on straight stitch. This is actually tremendous for what it does, and clearly it's better than a general purpose plate, or else they wouldn't have made it as a special accessory. But basically, if we, you can see how it has just a small point in the centre. This goes in place. And for this, you use the straight foot attachment, which looks like that. So as previously, just take that one off. Put this one in place. And then, making sure it's on a straight stitch, we can make sure that goes behind, and then, well, this is particularly useful if you have difficult materials, I guess, because it stops the material getting taken down through the throat plate. And if you have a look at that stitch now, you see, I'll just go from stitching there, but you can see that's lovely and even and neat.